Welcome to the Dr. Gabrielle Lyon Show, where cutting-edge science meets innovation and practical application for everybody. In today's episode, I sit down with the incredible Cindy Eckert. She is a serial entrepreneur and founder of Sprout Pharmaceuticals. Not only that, she has brought Addyi to market. And maybe you haven't ever heard of this, or maybe you have. But regardless, there are things in women's health, specifically women's sexual health and desire, that you may not even know what you are up against. This episode, I learned so much. I have a tremendous amount of respect for Cindy Eckert. I know that you are going to find this extremely valuable. Whether you are someone who is suffering from PCOS or low libido or fibromyalgia, you name it, I guarantee you are going to come away with this conversation as a totally different person. Please enjoy my conversation with Cindy Eckert. 6 weeks. 6 weeks is all it takes to start transforming your health and fitness. I am inviting you personally to the second round of the Forever Strong 6-week bootcamp. It's perfect for beginners and those who are ready to start mastering their macros and building a strong, healthy body. This isn't a one-size-fits-all program. It's designed with you in mind. Real people looking for sustainable results. With new weekly Q&A calls, engaging workouts, meal planning options, and my muscle-centric workbooks, you'll have everything you need to succeed. Past participants have loved the simplicity, accountability, and encouragement from our community. I mean, one was saying it coached them through a lifestyle change, not just a temporary fix. Are you ready to get started? Click the link in the description to join us. Let's be forever strong together. Cindy Eckert. The truth is, I knew that you're going to be wearing pink today.
I know, it's shocking.
It is shocking. And you guys have to understand, I am so excited to have this particular guest on the show. Cindy.
You're excited. I'm excited.
I'm very excited.
I'm thrilled
and
to
I'm
be
not
here.
wearing
Thank
pink,
you for
but I
having
should
me.
be. You are extraordinary. And your vision and your drive and your ambition to bring a voice to women in medicine is second to none. And I see it, and I think the world sees it. And I definitely want our audience to see you, know you, and just support what it is that you are doing. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. I think I go through life. My dad taught me this very young. I live by 4 words, which is, how lucky am I? And so I should say to you, how lucky am I to be sitting here with you, who I greatly admire for all of your work. And thank you for that introduction. It actually choked me up.
We need you, and we need you now more than ever. And I would love people, if you guys know who Cindy Eckert, do you know the first time I saw you was on Shark Tank? And I was thinking to myself, wow, this woman is amazing. But let me tell you my experience. I had never thought about the differences in women's health, the differences in the research for women versus men. It never even occurred to me. It never even occurred to me.
That's the dirty little secret, isn't it? We don't really think about it. And yet I've lived the case study of the difference, having built a company for male sexual health, right? And seeing what that landscape is, seeing how much that can make a difference in people's lives, how valued it is. And then I dared to build a company in women's sexual health and break through with the first treatment. And the path was radically different. I've literally, my professional journey in sexual health has been a tale of 2 sexes.
I mean, it's extraordinary. And when I saw you on Shark Tank, it had put you in, obviously, as an entrepreneur. And there's this whole story about how you built this business and then you sold it for $1 billion and you bought it back for a sandwich or $1.
A ham sandwich.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ed Milet.
Yes.
I always laugh by that reference.
But what is so extraordinary was, and I speak for, I think, that the people that already know who you are, is that there was a mission behind it.
Oh, yes.
And I would love for you to share. We will definitely talk about Addyi, the pharmaceutical, the female Viagra. But on the same side of that coin, or the opposite side,
Sure.
is a true story about what the current landscape is for women's health.
This has never been about a drug. This was about evening a playing field that never should have been uneven to begin with. That is who I am. That is how I've walked through my entire life. I think even from my childhood, it has been about looking at those things that are don't make sense and then challenging that. So when I stood in the field of male health and I ran a business in that, and I looked at a plethora of options, 26 at the time, and not a single one for women, I asked the most obvious question, which is, how can that be when more women than men are struggling with this issue? So for me, the mission when lightning struck to do something about this, it was about having the conversation that we obviously needed to be having. That's always, I think in life, I'm looking for those things where it just doesn't make sense. And then I want to ask the provocative question.
Disrupt the atmosphere. Tell me a little bit about your backstory for the listener. You had started in, was it pharmaceuticals?
Yeah, I worked for a big company. So right out of school, I'm such a nerd. I wanted to work for the Fortune's most admired business. I was singular. They could have been in oil and gas or in Houston. They could have been in anything. They happened to be at the time Merck, which was in pharmaceuticals. And I got into that company thinking I'm going to go work for the best. And I fell in love with the science. I now worked for a company that changed people's lives with what they did. And I didn't love doing that in a big environment. I was just a number.
How did they, what were they doing at the time?
So much research and development. That was back in the day when big companies really drove all the R&D. What has transitioned, like so many industries, is it's the little guys that are doing all the innovation. The big guys come and gobble them up, but they don't do that work. And it's really sort of those passionate, mission-driven problem solvers. And those were the people I wanted to be with, who were really solving challenges that could be transformative in people's lives. So if you track my career, I chased innovation. I literally went I ran toward those things where I would be learning, I would be making an impact. I have two big brothers. They'll tell you from the time I was little, I like to be heard. I like for people to listen to what I have to say.
You don't say.
So naturally, I was not a fit in a big kind of environment.
But you were always driven by this desire to make a positive impact?
I think impact, success, success for me, I've been very fortunate in my career. People talk a lot about what were you chasing? And, I often say success for me doesn't look like money. It looks like impact. It looks like change. And that's the thing I love to be some small part of. And it looks like choice. It looks like freedom. And so, the things I worked on were liberating people to live their best lives or take control of something that they had lost control of. And so naturally that leads me to sex. I come into, of all the fields, and actually the field of sexual health, relatively speaking, scientifically is young. There's a lot of new discovery. And so it's such a fascinating field because none of us would be here without sex. So it's important,
Don't tell
fundamental
my kids that.
to the human,
Do not tell
to the
my
human
kids
race.
that.
And I just loved, even when I was on the male side, watching what a difference it made in people's lives, and then realizing that the score was uneven, and that in fact women had nothing in their toolbox, and that started lit something inside of me of what we needed to be talking about.
How did you start seeing that? And basically you were looking at Viagra, and there were 26 different choices to treat
male sexual dysfunction. And it could be, ED, which is men's most common issue. That could be around testosterone, which is, a milieu of different symptoms, one of which is low libido. It could be around Peyronie. So there, all of these different things that men struggled with in the bedroom. Let's just say that. For that, they had 26 different medical options to make it right or to help them. And if you look at the data, more women than men actually struggle from sexual dysfunction. So JAMA, 43, or Journal of American Medical Association, 43% of women will struggle with some form of sexual dysfunction, 31% of men. And so I'm looking at all of the prevalence data for years and years over the world that women are actually struggling disproportionately, and women have 0 options, but men have more than 20. And you think, well, how can that be? And you have to ask that question. And I think what you come up with is the answer that we don't value pleasure for women.
Did you have an aha moment? Was there a moment?
100%.
Do you remember what that was?
I do. I was standing at the Sexual Medicine Society meeting. There is one of those, the best researchers you know in the world.
What up, Mo Cara?
That's right, the best. And they presented data that was showing brain scan imaging of women who have this medical issue. It's called HSDD, hypoactive sexual desire disorder. Plain English, low sex drive. That's causing them frustration and distress. They took a woman who had that medically, took a woman who did not, exposed them both to porn. Their brains lit up totally differently. The side-by-side contrast is stunning. And basically, it showed hardware. And I think I sat there and was looking at this, and I thought, biology. And it was so obvious in that moment. And yet we'd gotten away with, up until that moment, saying, well, we can't see it, so it must not be real. It's just psychology. And I think that started the premise for me in women's health. Forget just in this field in sexual health, but pervasively in women's health, be it cardiovascular health or any of these other things, that if we think of women as driven solely by emotion and therefore psychological beings, we will completely overlook that she is also a biological being. And that irritates me more than anything else.
It probably festered, right? It began
Yes.
to fester. It wasn't, I mean, you had that moment, you saw the brain images.
That was so like black and white. To me, the click, like I see this, everyone's gonna see this. We're going to start talking about this because there's a biological basis that is out of the control of these women who were patting on the shoulder and telling to have a bubble bath and just relax. And I think when that happened, what then transformed is I sat with it. And what I did is I just started talking to those women diagnosed with it. And I spent a year doing that. I just asked the best researchers in the world, can I spend time with some of your patients who have this issue? They had no solutions, but they were diagnosed with it. Can I talk to them? And how lucky am I that these women were willing to share their most private struggles with me, things that were a lot of tearful exchanges. And what struck me again was how consistent their story was. So they came from all different backgrounds, different ages, different experiences. And what they would say to me is, the switch went out. I don't know what happened. I used to think about it. I don't think about it. I love my partner. That was like a hallmark sign for me. They would make sure I knew before I left that room. I love who I'm with. This isn't about depression. This isn't about any of those things. It's like I never think of it anymore, but I want to. And what they were describing is what we were seeing in those brain scans. So imagine for a second if you drove your car around with your foot on the brake. You were just driving, riding the brake. That's what we're seeing. Their brain's just literally not activating with sexual cues. And if you could just take your foot off the brake, and even better, put it on the gas with some drive, what would be different? And they described to a person what we were seeing in the scans.
It sounds so clear.
And yet.
You would think, you know where I'm going with this. You know where I'm going with this. It sounds tremendously clear and obvious. And yet, here we are. When you had this moment and you saw these brain images, what was the next step? Were you thinking, okay, everybody is going to want to be able to make a medication to fix this? Or was there some next step that you were going to find to solve this?
Well, I want to go back to your first comment because to me, it was an obvious truth. The world has a history of denying obvious truths
Really?
for a long time when it causes disruption or change. And that should have actually been more obvious to me. To me, it was straightforward. And so the next step was there was this great science being innovated in Germany. So there was a product that they were looking at that worked on key neurotransmitters. So what are we seeing in those brain scan studies? We're seeing this difference in like activation or deactivation. Again, that like not, taking your foot off the brake with key neurotransmitters in the sex center or reward center of the brain. So they were doing studies in this compound. And when you look at things that work on these neurotransmitters in the reward center, all the things that have ever been on the market for them cause sexual dysfunction.
Right.
So they lower your libido. And so when you look at these products in trials, you actually are required to administer a scale that says, like, how much am I harming sexual function? Well, this compound in Germany, they administered that scale and all the scores went the other way.
So, flibanserin.
Yes.
Did I say it right?
Flibanserin.
Flibanserin. So I only know flibanserin is Addyi.
Yes. Much easier.
It was under investigation as an antidepressant. What you're describing are the normal side effects, the sexual side effects that typically happen when someone goes on Prozac or a Zoloft, something that is utilized to improve brain function, essentially. But they found improved sexual function.
Yes. So they were looking at it early days. It's so many of the products that we know and love. The blue pill, Viagra, right? It was a blood pressure medication.
Did you work on Viagra too?
I didn't work on Viagra. I just worked in that space. So I know all those fun stories of early days. But, it was being looked at, or it was a blood pressure medication with a really interesting side effect. And you can go through history and there's lots of different products that are discovered that way. And similarly, this product, so interesting, here it is looking at its effect on mood, and yet it's in fact improving sex drive as opposed to pushing it down. Really what's happening with those antidepressants, I keep going back to this analogy, but it's really further inhibiting you. Mm-hmm. And that's why you're having that reaction where it's harming sex drive. And this one is, again, disinhibiting. So it was spectacular. And to me, that was the science.
How did you find it?
Thing. It was being talked about. I mean, this was so exciting, such exciting discovery. And the best researchers in the world, again, Irwin Goldstein was the principal investigator on the key pivotal trial that got Viagra.
Very famous,
prolific study, prolific publications in the field of sexual health. And he knew, obviously, he'd been working on some of these research trials. And so that was the first place to go. And then it was, to me, so straightforward. You get the compound, you do the studies, you sit with the FDA, you say, what are the endpoints we have to prove in clinical trials to prove efficacy or effectiveness of this product? And I just went out and I set on that path. And what I didn't anticipate was the resistance that was coming. I didn't, because it was such an obvious truth. But again, in the world, change and humans are resistant to that. And so what I hadn't anticipated is just how deeply people would feel about women's sexuality.
Basically, what you're saying is you found this solution for women's sexual dysfunction. And, for the science people out there are, and we'll link to some of these studies, considered four types of female sexual dysfunction. Mm-hmm. Orgasmic disorder, sexual interest arousal disorder, genitopelvic pain, penetration disorder, substance medication-induced sexual dysfunction, a whole host of disorders that are not psychology.
They're not.
They are. I'm looking at the four types of female sexual dysfunctions, and these are biology.
Correct. And that is also the lightning rod. So the lightning rod is biology. And then the fight is, how do we take a woman and reduce her to emotion and psychology alone. And yet we both know that's deeply rooted in medicine, deeply rooted. Hysteria is still actually alive and well.
I have a couple statistics and a few pieces of background. And this was a quote. It says, even Hippocrates believed that the womb traveled throughout the body, causing hysteria, a psychological diagnosis that was only removed with the updated DSM-3 in 1980. Women were not required to be in clinical research until 1993. Again, you had mentioned 43% of women experience sexual dysfunction, 28 FDA-approved sexual dysfunction medications for men and only one for women. But what I do think is important, and you and I were talking before we were podcasting,
yes,
we are not anti-men. We are not, This is not a feminist conversation. This is about finding solutions for women, because women's health, just like men's health, just like children's health, is equally as important.
Exactly.
And there seems to be a bit of gaslighting in health and wellness, in the health space. That when, and you know, you sent me an amazing book that went through some of the data that a woman will go multiple times to a physician to be diagnosed with, I don't know, even PCOS.
Of course.
I think it was 13 visits, was it? Somewhere around that.
You know, the data, for example, there's a great study where if a woman walks into an ER, she describes the symptoms of a heart attack. She actually waits 7 minutes longer in the waiting room than a guy, because we have an initial, whether conscious or not, we have a deeply embedded belief that she might just be freaking out.
Let's talk about your muscle. If you care about muscle health and aging, which everyone should, then I want to share with you the only urolithin A compound I recommend that is evidence-based and proven to help not just muscle mitochondria, but all mitochondria in the body, and that is MitoPure. Old and dysfunctional mitochondria is one of the greatest measurable hallmarks of aging. There is now a compound that helps repair the health of our mitochondria, and MitoPure has made that available to everybody. If you care about strength, endurance, and overall energy, there are multiple randomized controlled trials supporting urolithin A. If you want to age well, then utilizing compounds such as MitoPure help our mitochondria produce energy more efficiently, replacing damaged mitochondria with fresh new ones. They have a beautiful product line with low sugar, gluten-free, whatever it is that you need or want, they've got you covered. You can try their various powders or soft gel, which is what I use. Timeline is offering our community 10% off your first order of MitoPure. Go to timelinenutrition.com/Dr. Lyon and use the code Dr. Lyon to get 10% off your order. That's timelinenutrition.com/Dr. Lyon. I recommend trying their starter pack so you can get a sense of what works for you. They say you cannot buy happiness, and that might be mostly true, but you definitely can buy the softest PJs and sheets and towels in the world. They feel amazing and thus may lead to more happiness. So technically, one of the sponsors of the show, Cozy Earth, sells happiness. These products are made from viscose from bamboo, and they are better than hot cider on a cold fall day. What makes Cozy Earth so amazing? Number one, they are durable. Their products are durable. They last easily up to 10 years or even longer. They don't pill, which is super annoying when things pill. They are soft. Again, they're made from viscose from bamboo. They are responsible in their production. They pride themselves on being responsible, and they are committed to quality. I have been using Cozy Earth products for years. And ladies, listen up. They have PJs. Guys, they also have PJs. In fact, you get matching PJs. And a new pair of sheep, they are fluffy sheep slippers. Sign me up. Honey, if you are listening, I would like a pair, but in fact, I'd like another pair, maybe 3 pair, gift one to Matt. You can get yours. Go to cozyearth.com/Dr. Lyon for 40% off. That's cozyearth.com/Dr. Lyon for 40% off. I have struggled with hair loss throughout my life. And if you are like the other 80 million Americans who are impacted by hair loss and are looking for a non-medication way to address this, I have a company whose product I love called Diviy. Now, there are a number of reasons why you may be having hair loss, like shedding or thinning. Maybe it's due to stress, postpartum, menopause, diet, or you may have a scalp with lots of oil buildup. Regardless the cause, or if you are male or female who wants to regrow or maintain the hair you have, Diviy improves the appearance of breakage, nourishes hair follicles, and removes product buildup. It has a number of compounds that are wonderful for your hair and your scalp. Copper tripeptide, caffeine, tea tree oil, which works to reduce and prevent excess buildup, and of course, amino acids, and finally, hyaluronic acid that is used to keep the hair and scalp hydrated. If you want to use a product that has science-backed ingredients, well, luckily, Diviy has given my listeners a special offer. Go to divyofficial.com/Dr. Lyon or enter Dr. Lyon at checkout for 20% off your first order. That's use Diviy, Divi, official.com/Dr. Lyon for 20% off your first order. If you could have the result of your mission, you are very mission driven.
Yes.
What would that look like? If you advocated for what you believe in, where would we be?
Women deserve proof in medicine. That would be where we are. We would believe that women are biological beings. We would lead our conversations with them with that premise. We wouldn't do that to the exclusion of exploring psychology, lifestyle, any of those things. But our first foot would be that she is a biological being, and I will therefore take seriously the things that she is saying, and we will explore that first, and then we'll layer in the rest. And we have the opposite that happens today.
Tell me.
We lead with she is a psychological being rooted in emotion, and therefore I am going to take what she's saying and I'm going to dismiss a good bit of it, not because I'm a bad person, but because I have been conditioned to do so. So I think about all of those women I talked to who'd raised their hand. They'd said, hey, can you help me? You know, tearfully in the doctor's office. And what had we prescribed them? Have a bubble bath.
Oh, okay.
Do better. Do you schedule date night? And what we almost don't hear in that is that we are putting a blame on her for something that is rooted in biology, for which we have proven, you know, science that would tell us we could help her. And we create this hopelessness there that's so very unfair to me. She doesn't ever have to take a medication. Let me say that very clearly. But she deserves to have the conversation of what we know medically. So if I could wave my magic wand, we would lead all conversations around women's health with evidence.
When you went to get this drug approved by the FDA, did you get the same experience? So you felt like, okay, here is the need. We're going to make this happen. There's a ton of data to suggest and evidence. So one of the big things that you had mentioned was it's all about the evidence.
It is.
That this matters for women.
Yes.
What happened after that?
Well, we got stuck in all medications, maybe all decisions we have in life are risk benefit, right? That's what we're coming down to. And that's the obligation. A company has to say, these are all the benefits that we prove it's effective. And this is it balanced against the risks. And what we got to is there any benefit to women having more sex? Because if you don't actually
but that's
think
also
there
crazy.
is.
But that is a subjective. So the evidence shows that this is helpful.
Totally.
And it's almost an arbitrary decision for somebody else to say, should they be having more sex or not, right? It's not anybody's decision.
It was literally the entire basis of the discussion was how much sex is enough for women to deserve to have it, which is an absurd premise.
Well, it's just a ridiculous question.
It's a ridiculous question, and we'd proven it against all the endpoints that the FDA required, which is we had to prove in clinical trials women had more desire for sex as measured by the medical instrument. They had more satisfying sex when they had it, and they were less stressed about it. Remember, this is going on in that center of the brain, so it's causing them profound distress if this is out of whack. And it just was an amazingly absurd discussion. I always like to flip the script. Like I always like to say, and if we asked a man this, if the premise of Viagra was like, well, how many more times, if we give men a pill, how many more times should they have sex to deserve it?
Matt, what do you think?
It sounds crazy, Matt, right? He doesn't want to even answer that question.
Matt.
6 to
but
9.
There you go. I mean, it's so, of course, it's so like, that was really the basis of it. And that was the idea of like marginalizing, I think, effectiveness, was talking about like, yeah, but it's just this many. It's just, and it's funny how that happened. So just cliff notes, Viagra got approved in 1998. It was deemed to meet such an important unmet medical need, erectile dysfunction.
Didn't it move through in like 6 months?
6 months. Fast track status through the FDA because that
Men
was such an important.
Erections.
They need those erections. It's a medical emergency.
Yes, my husband would definitely say that.
And for women, it took us 6 years. We had 3 times as many patients worth of data in our clinical trials at the time we submitted.
Would someone listening to this say that there was some other criticism? Like maybe there was some other reason why it didn't get approved or didn't get fast tracked?
I think if anybody were to say that, they would say, well, how well does it work? And they would be back stuck in this argument of
it's not
how are you defining it? And I think that they say that, and I think that is really what came to the door, is this really it wasn't a debate about a drug. It was a debate about whether or not women should get treatment for this thing, pleasure, that we don't necessarily value for her. And that was really the crux of it. I mean, when you looked at the data, and ultimately, obviously, we got FDA approved, so we proved it to the highest standard, right? To the scientific bar, the highest scientific bar of safety and efficacy to win FDA approval, and we've been approved in other places across the world. But if you look at the criticisms, you're going to realize what we're really talking about is, do we think this matters? And then we're going to be doing that risk benefit, and we're going to be talking about things like risks. All medications have side effects, let's be clear, including those that you buy over the counter at the drugstore. So all of them do, anything you're putting into your body. And so what we do is, if we don't value anything, we talk about all these things out here, risks, and we do that disproportionately because we don't place any value on the benefit of it. And so I think that's really a lot of our story.
And it's really fascinating because Addyi is something we use in the clinic all the time.
Yeah.
I've taken it myself. And there are other things in terms of benefit. So we might hear about the risks, which I mean are so minuscule for, in particular, even this medication, we'll just say. But there's some great papers about Addyi and body weight changes, weight loss.
Yes. Also, like, interesting scientific theory, right, around that reward center of the brain.
Let's talk about it.
Like, what are the trade-offs there of, like, why do you see that in clinical trials? And so really, I think the thesis would be, like, once I'm in that reward center of the brain, that drive, and I'm activating drive, so sex drive, but, drive, I think, has implication beyond that. Is that the correlation?
Yeah. And if someone is interested, so basically it acts on various receptors in the brain.
Yes.
So for the nerds out there, or for the physicians, I shouldn't even say nerds.
Yeah.
It's 5-HT, 1A, 5-HT2A. You'll be able to see it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good data. And again, there's the one study that I'm looking at is 24-week double-blinded placebo-controlled trials of 100 milligrams each at bedtime.
Yep.
And these women seemed to do really, really well. They experienced weight loss, better sleep. It wasn't just even about desire.
It's not, I think. And, for sure, just to be clear, our indication is for hypoactive sexual desire disorder. But I think what happens, and this is heralds back to like talking to those women, it's not about the sexual act. So I don't think, and you would tell me differently, that women specifically come in and they're like, Dr. Lyon, I have sex 2 times a week and I'd really like to make it 4. I don't think that's
they don't say that.
That's not the language. Yeah. And actually, even if you look at like hierarchy of needs, for women, right in that hierarchy of needs, before we ever get to self-actualization, you know, on sort of Maslow's scale, is intimacy, and it's connection and love. And I think in a, and I'm stereotyping here, but in common female language, we would talk about connection and intimacy in the top 3 things that we need. Men would talk about it as sex. So I think it's not the act. I think it is about that interest, that intimacy, that wanting to connect. And then when that goes off, when something biologically happens that disrupts that, what you do is you end up not only disconnected from the person you want to be the most connected to, but I think you end up being quite disconnected from self. And that shows up in a ton of data.
So I will say, again, when I put patients on this medication, yes, we use it for clinical indication of hyposexual desire disorder, but it can also be used off-label for other things.
Yes. And that is obviously always in a doctor's medical discretion with the patient. I'm sticking to our indication, but honestly, that's totally the discretion of, and I think it's much more, there's a whole surround sound, if you will, to desire and drive.
I agree. And if you're listening to this, I would ask your physician about flibanserin. They might not have even heard of it.
They won't have.
and I will tell you that off-label uses, it might be, could help them sleep, could help their body weight. But what we have seen in clinical practice is there is this subtle effect on mood. Definitely an increase in sexual desire, definitely. But also an increase in drive, in motivation. It's almost as if, again, it's not a antidepressant.
Right.
But I will say from the accounts of my patient, and also I've used it myself, you feel more, I don't know if the word is positive, but there is definitely more of a drive to do things.
We hear that anecdotally from patients. I think it's libido is a mood. It's actually mood. So there is a mood correlation here. And I think, again, once I'm in that neurochemistry that so many of us, I think, are most familiar with because of antidepressants, because they've been around for so long, you realize that there's that inhibiting effect from serotonin, and Addyi's just this interesting twist on that where it's disinhibiting. And so I do think you see that drive. And I certainly, one of the reasons I fought so hard for Addyi is I wanted it. I struggled with this. And I will say, and again, this is not a sponsored episode. No,
This is, I really wanted Cindy on because, number one, incredible advocacy for women. And number two, people have not heard of this medication.
And isn't that an interesting story?
I will tell you, I was at an event signing books. Yeah. And someone came, and I've heard this over and over again. A young woman came to me and said, you talk a lot about hormones, but I'm a breast cancer survivor and I'm 32 years old. Yeah. I cannot take hormones. Yeah. And she was telling me her story. And nobody had said, she was married. And she was talking about her sex drive. And I said, have you ever heard of Addyi?
Yeah.
And she had never heard of it.
I know. Well, look, I'll tell you the data. It makes me sad. So, despite the fact that it's more women than men suffer from sexual dysfunction, right? Here's a solution to women's most common issue. it comes out. Survey data last year, less than 5% of doctors have ever heard of it, less than 1% of women. And I think what that tells us is we still are uncomfortable talking about women's sexual health and pleasure. And we're still a far distance from valuing it. I think that's changing. I want to be optimistic and positive. I've seen a massive shift culturally in the conversation in all the years I've been at it. But it's funny that you don't know that story, because I can't go into a room anywhere across the world and say, have you ever heard of the blue pill? And not have the entire audience raise their hand.
Why do you think that is?
I think it is, again, rooted in a discomfort in talking about
From
women's
where though? So for example,
I think hysteria.
Okay.
I think it's biblical.
It's so deep, because if you go, because one of the ways that physicians get their information is a drug rep goes out.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
A drug rep goes
Yeah.
out, and here is, now I've heard about Pepsid.
Yeah,
Or
sure.
I've heard about
Sure.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
Wegovy.
Yes.
Is it that maybe we don't have reps that are going out, or what is the disconnect, do you think, in
Yeah.
terms of, are they calling the office and doctors' offices are saying, no, we're not really interested, or how is it not getting infiltrated?
Women find their way to it all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, so in truth, despite the fact that so few people know about it, there are women who are getting on it all the time. And if you look at population size, it's huge for how many women could be affected. Mayo Clinic just put out 40% of women will experience HSDD in their lifetime. That's their data.
Did you tell them about Addyi?
Yeah, right, exactly. I don't know that they mentioned it. I think the reason is that when we dared to disrupt and the world was resistant to disruption, which it is probably in many, many things, the attack came. I call it the fight of the first. The fight of the first
always gets bloody.
And basically, so many shots were taken, that became the truth. And I still am in conversations today, even with physicians who, when they tell me something categorically about Addyi, and I go, but how does it work? And they're like, I have no idea, because we haven't really had that conversation. And I think you hear about other things because we value, they're already conditioned to be acceptable, right? Maybe it's a conversation around, I don't know, Pepsid, right? GERD, reflux. Okay. My parents say this to me all the time. Cindy, could you have not done something in diabetes?
Right.
Nobody has like a visceral reaction to it. In sex, we did. And so we created a narrative. And I look at, show me another category in medicine in which the medical professionals and the data haven't controlled the narrative. You can't find it.
There was a New York Times, not New York Times, New England Journal of Medicine.
Yeah.
Tell me about this recent New England Journal of Medicine.
So many people sent it to me, and it was about hypoactive sexual desires, or it was about female sexual dysfunction.
Was it a narrative
specifically.
review? What was it?
It was a publication on how important this was to address. It actually had great data in it about the impact this can have in women's lives. So I think it was doing its part to say we should value this in women. We should be talking to women about this. And then it did the thing that I think we repeatedly do, which is, and what we should do is we should just lead with only psychology and psychological intervention, because I think that community has mostly controlled the narrative. And I think there's a wonderful place in that. There's a place for everything in the toolbox. So all right, this matters. The first thing we do is we examine all of the relationship, lifestyle, all of those things. If we decide we treat them, the products that are approved, there's two, Addyi and Vyleesi, right? There's more than one in this category. They are like, do they work and are they safe? Because that's the narrative. And then we go back to say, but it really matters. And like, this is what we've missed in that whole train. We've basically ignored biology again, even though this is a medical condition, because we've said, don't lead with that. Then we said, but if we have to do that, well, shoot, here's these things that we now don't represent the data, right? We represent risk, not benefit. Weird. And then we conclude by saying, well, it matters, but. And I think that is, it's so disheartening for me to the women who are affected by this, because do we accept then responsibility for when an insurance company, a doctor writes appropriately for a patient, Addyi. This woman has this diagnosis. This is a product, again, proven safe and effective by the FDA. She's appropriate candidate. The insurance company then says, we're not going to pay for it unless she fails marriage counseling. This is happening. Do we accept responsibility? Do the people who write the articles that say we must just do this thing with women first, we must sit them down, have them go to then you literally have taken a medical condition and you've said, don't use the medicine. I don't understand that.
Wait, you have to pause and you have to say this again, because it's so important. Because if it is happening with this, it's happening. I don't want to say across the board, but this is a representation of something happening that is potentially very subtle, maybe not subtle for us, but subtle infiltration within.
It's PCOS, it's fibromyalgia, it's let's keep going. It's maternal health care. It's whether or not birth control has been covered. It's not just this. This is just a case study of this. It's pervasive.
Okay. So we're gonna say this again because it's so critical.
Yeah.
Basically, women have hyposexual desire disorder.
Yes.
There are 2 medications that are approved. We are talking about Addyi right now, flubanserin. In order to get that covered by insurance, because it's expensive without, I think that there's ways around it now.
Yes.
But initially it was very expensive per month if it was not covered under insurance, which, by the way,
$20 a month if it is.
Right. So it's $20 a month if it is. The insurance companies will have the patient submit a script or whatever it is.
Yes.
And they are then required to go through and not take the medication first and try something else like marriage counseling before they get this medication approved.
For a medical condition.
For a medical condition. That is like saying, before you get this diabetic medication, you need to go back and continue to, I don't know, do whatever it is that you're doing and continue on with diabetes, a known medical condition.
But diabetes matters and this doesn't. That is what we are. This is the cycle we are still in that we must break. And that's why I get sad. And I don't think the intention, again, of the intention of the author was to say this actually matters, but we are stuck.
And that just came out and I'm looking for it. I'll have to, I'll have to get it sent, but this is a recent New England Journal of Medicine. Do you remember the title of it?
I don't.
Okay. We'll find it. On hyposexual desire disorder.
And it's really on female sexual dysfunction. Okay, so it's more broad, right? All of the different sort of dysfunctions a woman might experience. But just like what we can't be blind to in reading that is that we are in fact feeding a medical system to ignore medical intervention and to say the only intervention is psychological intervention. And so now I really do question, like, again, I'm going to flip the script. Can you remember a time in which any male patient who wanted to be on an ED medication was told you can't have it until you fail marriage counseling? No. And by the way, I don't know what that looks like. Is that a divorce certificate? Again, we're in a debate of worthiness. Does she deserve this medication? And it's quite clear to me. And again, I don't think it comes from, so long as bias exists in the medical establishment, conscious or unconscious, women pay the price. And I think it's what you said about hysteria. Like, hysteria is deeply embedded. The premise that women are more likely to be psychosomatic, that they're more likely to come in and be emotional about what they're feeling is so deeply and culturally rooted that you've got to really punch your way through that and maybe give grace to the person on the other side of the table that they're not even conscious that they're there. But I think in an ideal world, women will start to push through that, and we will force a conversation to lead with the medical evidence and proof. That's so important to me too.
And also what you're saying is, yes, there's evidence for sexual dysfunction, but also PCOS, this
totally
that we are talking about sexual dysfunction. But what's so fascinating is it is pervasive.
Yes.
And how do you think that that is going to change from a real nuts and bolts? So when you were going through to get this FDA drug approved, was it an older generation that was in power? Why was it so challenging? Because you clearly had the evidence. You know, why do you think, and what is actually going to be the way forward?
I do think a newer generation will not tolerate it. So I think that's part of change, right? There's wonderful thought leaders like you that so many people have access to now that is different than it was previously. So I think we're making better, you know, more informed decisions. And I think fundamentally, though, it is about all of us looking in the mirror and deciding, are we actually leading this conversation with proof and with data? And that's the only way we actually change it, is by women demanding better, by demanding that the conversation be led with that and not with the pat on the shoulder that comes from a place of good intention, but is in fact dismissive.
It is. And how are you advocating for this? Because I mean, you're here talking about it, and I'm sure that you're thinking about this all the time. All the time.
All the time.
And so what does it look like?
I think it's information. I think it's education. I think it's so simple. I think it's actually just having the conversation so that I recognize the cues, like I see that obvious truth that's sitting right in front of me when it's being dismissed or overlooked. And I have the courage to just push back a little and say, no, hold on a minute. Like, this is what I'm experiencing. What could be going on here? And look, we do it obviously through medical education, right? That's one of the parts that I like to do, is how do we change the questions that we ask women on women's wellness exams, things like that, so that we are asking questions that provoke an evidence-based conversation. But I think for everyone listening, for women, I hope it just, nothing more than hearing this to say, God, I've heard these like case study after case study where it just doesn't make a lot of sense that I'm not getting access to something that might be helpful, and pushing on your own behalf that you deserve it. I want to talk about that for a minute though, because I think we're talking big things, right?
Yeah.
Big things that are seismic shifts in culture. And one of the outcomes, I think you have to start looking. If the top of the tree says, or if the top of the pyramid says, okay, women are psychological, men are biological, we go solve. We take this one and we start to impose doubt on women when they say the symptoms or say the things. So we stay stuck in this space. And then we have folks who see that there's a need, and then they prey on it. And I think that is a whole nother piece of this equation.
Yeah.
Part of the problem is we've set up a cycle of saying women are psychological, so we don't solve in medical treatment for them. We don't include them in studies. We don't solve with solutions for conditions that uniquely affect them. We're not going to bother with any of that because they're just psychological. And we've now we have a whole system that's screwing us, and then the opportunists
no pun intended, friends.
The opportunists sneak in, and they say, "Yeah, but I'm going to go sell you something."
That is a very astute observation, and it is a new problem. By the way, I think that's a new problem, or at least we're seeing it so much more.
So much.
Basically, what Cindy is saying for you guys listening is that there's a real problem here. whether it's sexual dysfunction, whether it's PCOS,
Totally.
whether it's you fill in Mad Lib, fill in the blank.
Yes.
The research is either A, being done, has been done, we have a solution, and or still needs to be done. But we might have a solution, right? And you pick whether it's, again, PCOS, whatever it is. On the same hand, if women and women issues are not brought to the forefront and we don't have language and we don't have vocabulary, it allows for predatory behavior to come in to sell you things that A, you don't need, B, sell you promises, further dilute real, meaningful treatment that then totally destroy people's health.
And if we fall prey to it, we've reinforced that then nobody ever wants to invest the dollars to do the hard work and the research in the beginning. Like, we're in a vicious cycle here. We've discredited sort of the medical need to study women. Women have now fallen prey, and they have been trained to preferentially pick the things that are not medicine.
You have to help. You have to help me understand. I am so fascinated by what you're saying. I really, really hope you listeners are out there and really feeling what we're talking about, because I see this all the time, and I see women spend decades suffering.
Yes.
And because they have been fed a narrative that it's in their head, or that they shouldn't take medicine.
Yes.
And that's all
predatory.
Yeah.
It's predatory.
How did you I don't know. How did you put that all together?
I watch it. So look, let me tell you the thing I'm most proud of. We study this in more women than any other new drug application for women. You said earlier the stat, women weren't even required to be included in clinical trials until 1993. You know what I believe? I believe in evidence. I believe you have to do the hard work and prove the thing. And you are going to prove, like, these are the conditions in which you should use it, in which you shouldn't use it. You literally do characterize all things, because I believe that that's what women deserve.
Totally.
They deserve proof and evidence and real things. So that's who I am to my core. And then I watch, like, so many friends who are like, I don't take medicine. I'm like, that's interesting.
I know.
What are you worried about? Proof. Like, you can't say, I don't like data. What are you talking about? You like data. And then I look at them, have a baggie full of things that they take. And I'm like, what are the studies? And they're like, I don't know. I'm like, but you put it in your body, and that's not a sugar pill. Like, it's not benign, right? It might not be doing all those things, but it's not benign. And, like, to me, I would pick the thing I know the risks. I know the benefit. It's clear. Like, they've done the work. But we choose this other lane because we've been conditioned to do it, because, again, we're not worthy of evidence or being included or any of that. And it's such a vicious cycle, an unfortunate cycle that we're in. I have to tell you a story. So I was, I think it's not even a month ago. I was just sitting, I went on social and I said, I give up. Like, I'm waving the white flag. I can't.
Did you really, or did you say this publicly, or
yes.
you were? Yeah.
And I can just, totally what happened that day is my phone blew up. Everyone was sending me, there was a release of an article. There's 2 new prescription medications for female sexual dysfunction. And, you know, I'm so in this field, like, I would know. Like, I'm always watching it. I'm always excited. I would support them. Like, I think we have a long way to go to have our 26, right? We deserve many more.
Get going. That's right.
So I'm like, oh no, what is this?
Because it's probably,
it's
saw
not
this.
true.
Right.
So I spent a day on the phone with editors saying, at best, you are misleading women. At worst, you are putting them in harm's way.
So what was it?
So it was a great, Silicon Valley, couple bros in the Valley decide, like, hey, man, everybody's talking about this. Let's go put something together. They put it in pretty packaging. It's got a great name. They're great at branding. Good for them, right? And it's not that they see the need. They see the need.
Was
and
it
then
a medication
they combine.
What was it? It was
It's
something...
a compounded medication.
Okay.
So they took existing prescription medications, combined them and said, nobody who's taken it has had any side effects. Well, all medications have side effects. Like those drugs that they combined all have risks and benefits. And hey, by the way, once they combined them all, they didn't bother to study it in women. They had 0 studies. So they're going to go out there and say, wow, look at this great new shiny object that's going to help all of you women who are struggling. And there are millions. So here's this thing that you can get that's a new prescription medication, which it is not. It is a combination of existing drugs that they're putting together for which they've had no studies and for which nobody is overseeing them. So I have a funny, my story is a little funny with the FDA because I, on one hand, pushed them really hard that the standards were uneven. Let me say this. I don't want a world without the FDA.
Right.
I want a world in which there is a body forcing companies to be good citizens and do the work. And by the way, when you do that, you agree, I'm going to spend millions and millions of dollars, decades of research to come up with something to prove that it does work and that the risk benefit is there. And then you've got this whole black market for women that just has a tiny print. These claims have not been evaluated. And that's what we're worth. We're worth, these claims have not been evaluated. Like FDA they inspect our facilities. They know what goes in. We all of our promotional materials we put out there, we submit to them. We fair balance it. We tell people, don't take this if you're this person, don't take this. We do those things to be good stewards of science and really good stewards of medicine. And then you've got this whole other thing. And it's so devastating to me because, again, at best, I think it's robbing or misleading women. It's giving them false hope because the claims are outrageous and they're not vetted. And at worst, it's harming them. Those medications that they were combining, some of them are not even supposed to be combined.
You are not somebody who takes things personally. And I think that, when I first met you, I recognize that. You're not someone that is taking things personally. And it's so interesting, from the perspective as a physician. And people have to understand, this is not a mission that you had thought about and planned out.
No.
Right?
Right,
I mean, I think that there are, I think that it's valuable to say that there are, certain buckets of individuals or cultures that are like, okay, this is for women's rights. This is for, that was not, what happened is you saw this treatment. You saw that there was, 2 divergent paths. Is that fair to say that this was not about women when you were in the science space? You started with men. It was beginning to unravel and see how this was beginning to affect everybody. Is that?
It was the double standard in medicine.
Okay. So I want
the double standard in medicine.
I want people to understand where you're coming from. Yeah. That it was kind of like when I figured out when I was doing my fellowship, this wasn't a body fat problem. And when I saw it, I was like, oh, everybody. I looked at brain. Looked at fMRIs. I looked at images, and I was thinking, everybody's going to get this.
Yes.
And for the first, 7 years of my career, I was begging to be on a podcast.
Yeah.
Please, I have to share this. I have to share this message.
Yeah.
And I think that it becomes important to understand where the core of someone's mission comes from, because social media and out in the public, I think that the core intention behind it is important to understand do you agree where that person is coming from?
It is 100%. The double standard. I mean, I think about, I had an unusual childhood. I grew up part of my time in the Fiji Islands, and I didn't know that. Yeah. My dad is a huge adventurer, and I can remember really like in the 4th grade, I was sitting in a classroom, and it was a society in which social rank mattered, right? Here I am, this like American kid sitting there, such an outlier. So of course I was very privileged, relatively speaking, right? And I'm sitting in this room, and I can remember on the first day of class, the teacher asked every kid to tell what their dad did. And I was sitting next to a girl who was very nervous that this was coming to her. Like in the social structure, look, I'm getting choked up. Her dad wasn't, like at the same rank. And I can remember before when it got to me, I said, "How is this relevant?" Because I
That's
probably
pretty funny.
was always a little bit this way. I mean, how lucky am I that I got an exposure at a very young age for something that was, very different to my world, and like watched how things like this can happen in social structures and society. Maybe I'm a student of that. And so I can remember saying, "How is this relevant?" Because I wanted to stop right there before it got to the child sitting next to, that was like, that was in me, and that doesn't make me special or anything else. I just think that is in me.
Makes you an advocate
and
for people.
I had to spend the rest of that semester in the principal's office because I talked back. But that is the same, I think, for why I did this. When it was the obvious truth to me, it needed to be said. Somebody needed to say the thing. And actually, to me, at the beginning, I don't think I even knew it was going to be met with such resistance. And then when it was met with resistance, it was about, you have to keep saying the thing. You have to keep pushing, and you can't take it personally, right? Actually, the critics are as informative as the proponents, because you understand, like, what is that? What am I uncovering? And so in many ways, I think for this has been a journey of discovery, even for me, in like, how are we societally conditioned here? And when what the answer screams to me is women matter less medically, I'm not going to quit pushing.
I am so happy to hear that you guys have been getting your blood work done, most likely, because arguably we know that nothing is more important than staying on top of your health responsibilities. Right now, there is more talk than ever on hormones, and you know where you are at, and the only way to do that is to get your blood work. And I'm so grateful to our sponsor, Inside Tracker, whose service I use myself to test my own hormones. They offer 10% off Inside Tracker subscription in any plan. Just head over to insidetracker.com/Dr. Lyon. Let's face it, to live your healthiest, longest life possible, you have to get your blood work done. Most people put that off, but that is not a champion mindset, and you are here to get it done. And by the way, let's say you've got an Oura Ring or an Apple Watch, and we all know you've got DNA. Inside Tracker looks at all that and gives you meaningful recommendations, things like food, supplements, workouts, lifestyle choices, and even ways to optimize sleep and stress. Yes, sign me up. Whatever it takes, whatever it is that you want, you are going to do it better with your blood work and knowing what is going on. Go to insidetracker.com/Dr. Lyon for 10% off all their stuff. I recommend and take Puori O3 Ultra Pure Fish Oil. Why? I did my training in nutritional sciences with a heavy focus on muscle health. There is an abundance of evidence supporting the use of omega-3 fish oil in overall health, muscle, brain, mood, the list goes on. Now, I won't take just any omega-3 supplement. I only want the best quality fish oil. That's why I've been using Puori. This is the ultimate in high quality and high class brands. Puori's O3 is third-party tested. I trust it to be free of heavy metals and other impurities. Every batch, which is amazing, of Puori O3 Ultra Pure Fish Oil and all of their supplements are tested against more than 200 contaminants, with all results published online. Puori Omega-3 Fish Oil offers a high dose of 2,000 milligrams of long-chain omega-3 fatty acids, EPA, DHA in natural triglyceride form. Now, I worked out a deal in exchange for sponsorship. They will offer my listeners 20% off the entire store. That even applies to already discounted subscriptions. That means you'll get almost a third off the price. But to get this offer, go to Puori, that's PUORI.com/Dr. Lyon, or you can use my promo code Dr. Lyon. Don't wait, you'll love it. Thank you to BondCharge for sponsoring this episode of the show. Let's face it, we live in an environment where there are tons of insults. Insults from being inside, out of the elements. And when I say elements, I mean sunlight. I love BondCharge products. They make a whole host of products, and particularly I love their red light therapy. I love their red light panels, which has near infrared and red light. It is very warm. Red light therapy has been used for a very long time. And by the way, it's FDA approved for fine lines and wrinkles. I use the full panel across my whole body. And just in case you want to get ready early for Halloween, you can use the red light mask, which I use frequently. And I love because it directly is on my skin, on my face. I use it 3 times a week. And I am telling you, I have noticed a difference. If you are someone who struggles with energy or sore muscles or just overall fatigue, definitely check out BondCharge. Check out their red light therapy. I get tons of questions on red light therapy. BondCharge is an incredible product, very well made in Australia, ships worldwide. You can get yours. Go to bondcharge.com. Use the code Dr. Lyon for 15% off. That's bondcharge.com. Use the code Dr. Lyon for 15% off. Now, back to the show. Well, we're really lucky to have you. And frankly, I hadn't even thought about this until I heard you talk.
Yeah.
And
well, I appreciate you saying that too. I mean, that's very fair. I think most of your listeners today won't have necessarily thought about it.
And that, it goes even beyond the medication.
Yes.
It just thinking about how women are studied.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking about that maybe blood pressure drugs affect women differently.
Yes.
Depending on, who knows? I'm just throwing this out there, different premenopausal or postmenopausal.
Yeah. Well, look at Ambien, right? A common sleep drug where it hadn't been studied in women. And so actually, when we looked at women, typically lower BMI was different in terms of how it's metabolized, and therefore they were having worse sort of hangover effect and accidents. That was actually a phenomenon at the time. So you start to think about, it shows up in so many ways, right? I say once we have accepted the premise, right, that women are emotional beings ruled by psychology and men are ruled by biology.
And by the way, we are, I was thinking about instinct, motherhood instinct.
Yeah.
There's this idea of mammals have instinct.
Yeah.
And that is true.
Yeah.
There is instinct that perhaps a female would have. However, that absolutely doesn't diminish the biological nature.
It's a Venn diagram. It is. It's social factors. I mean, this is biopsychosocial, biology, psychology, social factors. You just can't take one of the circles and throw them away. You can't do that. You can't do that for men either, right? Men aren't only biological creatures. There's also psychology at play. So maybe we've underserved them in not actually more exploration of that. But I think once you accept a premise that doesn't allow for as much, doesn't demand proof for women, you start to see it show up not only in a regulatory queue of getting medications approved where there might be a double standard. I think to the FDA's credit, right, they listen to women and they changed it. So to their credit, right, we started there, but we didn't end there. So they grew. I think it's a regulatory pathway. I think it shows up in a physician's office with the language that's used. I think it shows up in insurers and what they might get away with in terms of covering or not covering things for women, and even in advertisement and how there's a different standard even there for talking about certain things as it relates to women.
Is there?
Well, of course,
Tell
these things that
us.
are stigmas for women's health are we don't talk about that. I mean, in our case, and now, Meta is a good ally of ours with Facebook, Instagram, et cetera. How do you get the word out on things like this? You go there. Well, all of our ads were taken down.
Was there a reason?
Yeah, because we say sex.
But what about Viagra?
Because the name of the condition, it says erectile dysfunction.
Oh, I see.
But is that true, or is it really just that it's female?
But also, why couldn't we say sex?
I mean,
but
it's it's so layered. Like, it's just so layered. And you realize, I think when you go through this, it shows up here, And what the end result is women not getting the care they deserve or that they need, and nobody innovating for us. And when nobody innovates, the care you receive is the stuff that they didn't study on you and they don't have evidence for. And so, like, that's the cycle that I would love to break.
The innovation is fascinating. And what drives the innovation? Is it the problem? Is it what drives innovation? Again, for coming up with these solutions, is it recognizing the problem first?
I think it's the champion, isn't it? It's always the jockey, not the horse. Like, I think that's the truth. And I think that we need champions in women's health. We need women solving problems that they have faced, that women have uniquely faced. I think it needs champions. I think there's a lack of champions.
You are a really big advocate for other women, actually.
Yeah.
And I think that brings you a lot of joy.
I love it.
Yeah.
I'm so lucky. How lucky am I that, I'm surrounded by incredible women doing big things in this world and actually creating change that is lasting.
Yeah. Did advocating for Addyi change you?
I had to step out front. I'm really quite introverted. And, when the thing had to be said out loud, it pushed me forward in a way that was probably not in my basic nature. But it did change me, because here's what I got. I got a front row seat to what it means to advocate. And it wasn't just me. Let's be clear. It was women who took time off of work, got childcare, flew across the country to sit at a federal agency, the U.S. government, to describe their struggles with their sex life. They're the heroes. It was, these women's rights groups and women's health groups that when I asked the provocative question of, like, wait a minute, what? They all started asking questions too. And I think once I got to observe that and how that can really create impact and long-lasting change, it changed me completely. And so when I got this drug approved and it felt like the dream come true, the entrepreneur's, so to speak, dream come true, like crossing the finish line, the work was far from done.
Yeah.
And so to me, the joy is, how do you help others get there quicker than you were able to? Or how do you celebrate the thing that they're dismantling, so that women have a better future?
When you do the Pinkubator,
yes,
can you tell me a little bit about, our mutual friend, Ashley Graham, this is making me think about, she's very much a female entrepreneur as well.
Wonderful.
And so the Pinkubator is what is that?
It's really and so for me, it's about helping women with big ideas. I love the firsts. I love the things that nobody believes are ever going to get to be done. And if I can bet on them in some way, be it through mentorship or money or both, it's trying to get them there more quickly than I did. And what happens out of that, which I love, of these companies that I've, really had the privilege to get to help, is that it's the multiplier effect. Because once you get somebody else there, then they go get somebody else there, then they go get somebody else there.
If you choose wisely.
Yes, that's fair.
If you choose wisely.
Fair.
If you choose women that are givers.
Yes.
And
for sure.
If you choose wisely.
For sure. You do. And I think you can, I can remember a woman came in to pitch. She was so nervous. She had never pitched before, and she had created a device that was really accessible to all in terms of affordability on detecting concussion. And
that's cool.
She was so cool, like great engineer. And I was in the room, and I happened to be being visited that day by some of they're great male investors, but they have a different lens, right? And they were these are the guys that laughed me out of the room, by the way, when I asked them to invest in me.
They should have to wear a bright pink tie or something.
They wear their pink socks, their pink tie, and it's so delightful. So we happened to be in this pitch meeting, and she got so nervous at one point. She was Cuban, and she was showing like all of her prototypes in this Cuban cigar box. And it was so great. Like, they were made with popsicle sticks at the beginning, you see this evolution. And like, she was so overwhelmed in that moment. She like totally choked up. And I can remember she like got herself together, kept going, and we walked out of the room and we were like talking. I was talking to the guys and they're like, we can't believe that you didn't say like right then, there's no crying in baseball, right? Or say something to her like, like this isn't going to fly. And I said, you guys are such idiots. That's the moment I knew I was investing. Because I knew right then, like she was going to work every day, wake up, look, I'm emotional talking about it, and put it all in. And I think that's how you choose wisely. There's a signal, right, in some of these people that I've been so lucky to help. And people can fool you, of course. I don't have a perfect batting average for sure, but there's something in that where you know it is about so much more. And we've said this so many times. Yeah. This for me was never about a medication.
No.
I love it. I love that if that helps you, you deserve to know it exists.
Yeah.
You deserve to have access to it. You deserve for your insurer to pay for it. You deserve all of those things. That's not what this was all about. And actually, I should speak to all my team. It's not what it's about for any of them either. Like all the people that came and did this with me or surrounded me, they weren't doing it for a medication. People will criticize them and say like, oh, it's just for that. And they're like, it's about so much more.
And it's not for the money either.
Or we would have given it up a long time ago. We would have said, great, did it. Yay.
Yeah.
And I think, that's not what this is about. And there's still work to be done.
What phase are you in now?
Oh God. What phase?
And let me ask this. So, it's out there.
Yeah.
Now, what's the job now?
Yeah. I think the job now, well, the job for me is always learning. So I'm always in that phase. But the job as it relates to, I think, company or product is awareness. And that's really what sits with me. Like, isn't it the most fascinating thing that you've never heard of it? And what does that say about us? And does it say that we wrote it off at the beginning because we didn't value it? Or we still are stuck in the argument that women don't deserve this? Are we still debating whether or not it's a medical condition when it's been around since the 70s? And that's what those are the things I think about every day of like, this is so fascinating. Why are we here? But we're definitely in the awareness phase. And we've got such great, look, nothing is happier for me than to be out in the world getting to speak or talk. And a woman comes up and she pulls me to the side and she's like, hey, I have to tell you a story. I had one that was so potent to me because she made a beeline for me when I came off the stage and she said, I have to speak to you. I have to speak to you. And there was another one I've been on stage with who was trying to like drag me out because she needed me to go to something. And she was not letting her have it. She's like, nope. And she said, I was already lawyered up. Like our marriage was falling apart. This was the beginning of it, but so many more resentments, right? Everything started to unravel because connection and intimacy had really unraveled. And she said, I heard you on a podcast. And I thought, what if it's this? And I went to my doctor and she's like, and I've been struggling with this issue. I never knew there was a name for it. I didn't know it was medical. I've been told all of the things that you talk about. And she's like, can I take a picture with you and show my husband? And I was just like, whew, just
now
that.
I know why I get up.
So like we're in that phase. So like it's not that no one knows or women are on it, but I think we're a long way from the conversation being really socially acceptable. When the blue pill came to market, it was the cover of Time magazine.
I know.
That's how much we value it.
Yeah. I mean, again, friends, this conversation is so much more than a medication.
Totally.
But we can begin to shift the tide. I mean, where do you think the future is going? Is it going to be with healthcare professionals? Is it going to be, how do you see this changing landscape begin to move more in the favor of equal healthcare?
I think all things in women's health have a 10-year truth horizon. That is my thesis.
Okay.
So I think
I've never heard of that.
I think it takes 10 years for us to like
so how far into
rail
this are we?
Against it. We're there.
Okay.
Like rail against it. Start, we have to, what's the great, it's literally the Gandhi quote. He says, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win.
Right.
That's the phase we're in. We're in the then you win phase. And I want, like, what's going to happen is the then you win is when women speak up for themselves. That's the then you win, really. And I think that's what's happening culturally right now is you have actually a pushback. Be careful because the opportunists will come because they'll see the need. And so you have to be clear in that focus. But like then you win is when you use the vocabulary to like push a little bit harder, not impolitely, but politely to say, ask the provocative question. That's where I think we are.
Cindy Eckert, I could talk to you for another probably 3 hours.
I love it.
But
Same.
I am so grateful for the work that you are doing. And I am a full supporter of you, the mission, the greater conversation.
Thank you.
And truly, you are extraordinary. So thank you so much
for
coming
having
on.
me.